Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huriahi mā tātou e te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Huie, tai kia. Well, kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to this open free webinar for an hour, where we'll be hearing from MS, Tony and Jordan, who are all online with us, about what lessons they and we can all glean from the evaluation that they delivered as part of the Insights Irrigation Insight project, which they'll tell you a little bit more about in the presentation. The presentation itself is going to run for about half an hour, and then leaving lots of time for questions. And really encourage you to think of and pose any questions to the three of them that you like. One of the key motivations for IPN setting up these free webinars is to create another space and another way for people to just ask the questions and have a bit of a free and frank conversation about how do you do this, what's easy, what's hard, all of those sorts of things. In terms of the question, asking and answering questions, we welcome it coming in two different ways. You can pop them into the chat, but you're also welcome to put your hand up and ask them directly. And different formats are going to work for some of you. I personally sometimes find typing questions in actually quite hard. Sometimes I do find it easier just to ask it directly. So either way that works best for you. Otherwise, MS, Tony and Jordan, do you want to just really quickly introduce yourselves? And then I'll hit the go button.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm MS Srinivasan. I'm a principal scientist at NIWA Christchurch. I'm a catchment hydrologist. Recently, I led the MB program that finished in September 2021. And what we are going to talk about today is from that program. And off to Tony.
Great, thanks, MS. Kia ora, Tony White. I'm an evaluator in the International Development Unit in Plant and Food Research. I've been working in evaluation for the last sort of 6 or 8 years. On to you, Jordan.
Morning, everyone. I'm Jordan Luttrell. I work at NIWA and I'm a social scientist who has dabbled in evaluation in this program under the wings of MS and Tony. So thanks for being here.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I shall click the go button. And just another little disclosure. So we've actually got this pre-recorded. Everything worked fine when tested it before, but if anything happens to fall over, Tony and Jordan and MS will come on, but you'll know better than me if something goes completely AWOL. Otherwise, let's continue.
Morena, welcome to IPN webinar on research impact monitoring and evaluation. My name is MS Srinivasan. I'm a principal scientist in catchment hydrology at NIWA Christchurch. Recently, I led the MB Endeavour program called Irrigation Insight that examined the irrigation water use on farms. As a part of the program, to capture the research impact, we used a monitoring and evaluation process. Today, I'm going to take you through that process, how we set it up and what we did and how did we assess the research impact. Today, I'm going to be joined on this talk by Jordan Luttrell and Tony White. They're both social scientists and experts in monitoring and evaluation. First, I'll set up the scene for you, giving a big picture view to this program. Then Tony and Jordan will take you through this monitoring and evaluation process. I'll end the talk to show an example as how this monitoring and evaluation process led to an outcome that was very impactful for this research. Before I take you through this talk, first I would like to acknowledge the support by our research partners, program partners, the funding agencies, stakeholders, and the end users. This is a big team, as you can see on screen, and they all contributed to the success of this program. Irrigation Insight is an MBA Endeavor program that ran from 2016 to 2021. The core challenge this program addressed was improving on-farm irrigation water use efficiency. How important is this challenge? We'll see it in the next slide, but the thing to note on this slide is when we wrote this proposal in 2015, as scientists, our idea was we could improve on-farm water use efficiency by giving better access to data. We thought that was the barrier to making a change. So why is irrigation water use efficiency a challenge to tackle? Firstly, irrigation is the biggest user of our fresh water across the world. 60% of our water that we use today is actually used for irrigation. And we also know through a number of field studies and surveys that 80% of our farmers use quite subjective methods to trigger irrigations. The top two methods used are feel of the soil and look of the crop. And the third comes the supply availability. There are places where they don't get the water when they need. They apply when there is water to apply. Researchers have been working on this problem for a long time. They have come up with very simple methods of just rainfall and subtracting the evaporation to say how much irrigation is needed, all the way to developing soil moisture sensors that can measure soil moisture every minute and tell the farmers what is the soil moisture demand. But still, the tools haven't been picked up by the farmers. The challenge here is why is that and what causes this poor uptake of these tools? So researchers have been tossing up this question for a long time, why there is such a poor uptake of irrigation scheduling tools and methods among the farmers. One thing that they identified as a barrier is the approach used to develop these tools and promote these tools among the farming communities. We have long been using a tech transfer approach to develop these tools and promote these tools among the farming community. In the tech transfer world, the problem is defined by researchers and they identify the solution, they develop the tools and they push those tools onto the users. So this has worked quite well for many of our problems, but not in this case with the irrigation water use efficiency. Since tech transfer approach has failed to deliver the desired water use efficiency and uptake of irrigation scheduling tools over years, for the Irrigation Insight MBA program, we decided to use a co-innovation approach. A co-innovation approach offers space to bring in multiple stakeholders and end users into one platform to discuss the problem, to identify the solutions and implement the solution in a way that is sustainable to everyone in the group. So what I got there on the slide is various principles that we used in this co-innovation approach. But how does a co-innovation approach looks like in this irrigation program? If you are a visitor from tech transfer world to a co-innovation world, a few things are going to strike you. First, one is a co-innovation world is quite non-linear and multi-directional. This is because of the diversity of the views that exist in the room, which again is a function of diversity of users sitting in that room. And the third one that will strike you is a co-innovation placing importance on the process than on the product. So if you take the example of this irrigation water use efficiency problem, in a tech transfer world, a researcher can look at the hard evidence of water use data, soils data, climate data, and say how well or poorly the irrigations are scheduled. But in a co-innovation world, things are quite different. Not everyone uses the same data to define the problem, identify the problem, which means the first step in a co-innovation process could be even defining the problem itself. A researcher may say irrigations are poorly scheduled based on these data. Someone else may come into the room. They may define the same problem. Irrigations are poorly scheduled because they're not getting the water at the right time. There are other constraints on applying irrigation at the right times that they like to apply. So even they may define the problem the same way. A researcher may say that the endpoint could be the same, but the way that they define the problem could be quite different. This also has got an implication on the solution that are developed based on the problem defined. So in a co-innovation world, because of the multiplicity of views and the users, there are a few things that we need to establish first. One is trust, the other is inclusiveness, having a shared vision and a shared value for the problem that is defined. These are all the things that we don't really bump into in a tech transfer world every day. This is quite unique to a co-innovation setting. This also meant in the irrigation insight program, we need to have a monitoring and evaluation program that can capture some of these less measured or not easily measured values like trust and inclusiveness and report on those things as a research impact. So this meant we have to design a research monitoring and evaluation program for this irrigation insight program. So Tony and Jordan did that part, and I invite Tony now to take us through this monitoring and evaluation part of this talk.
Thanks, MS. Kia ora koutou, ko Tony White tuku ingoa. I'm the lead evaluator for the Irrigation Insight program. Today we're going to give you a bit of insight here around the process that we went through, some of the tools we used, and some of the insights and learnings that we got as a result. This particular diagram here shows kind of the process that we went through. At the top, you can see we had good clarity and needed purpose that moved into developing a participatory theory of change and then a participatory evaluation plan and rubrics, both of which I'll touch on a little bit later. Then after we had a good plan at the start, we went through, we did a whole lot of mahi, first half of the program, got through halfway, did a midterm evaluation, bit of a stock take, where are we at, what have we found, how are we progressing. On top of this, a little bit more planning, move through doing a bit more mahi for the second half of the program into the summative evaluation or end of program evaluation. I think a really important aspect of this particular diagram is this plan, do, review, a really cool part of any evaluation. You can see that even from the start of the program, we did that plan stage, clarity, purpose, theory of change, evaluation plan, rubrics. Then we went out to the do stage, went and did some work. We did a review, midterm review. And on top of that review, we figured out, okay, we need to do a little bit more planning on top of what we've just learned. We went out and did a bit more work, did a review stage at the end with the summative evaluation. And on top of that, a whole lot of feedback loops in between that reflect mini plan, do reviews through the whole program of work. So this is the theory change that we used. A theory change is a slightly different tool than the program logics, which you may be more familiar with, but they essentially do the same things. They talk about the change space, the theory of developing the change space from where you are at the start to where you will be at the end of the program. As the team developed this, we did this as a participatory process. We identified that there were three key streams in our theory of change. One was around the practices on farm, one was around engaging farmers and stakeholders, and one was around how the team works. So the co-innovation approach was particularly key in developing that stream of work. On top of the theory change, we overlaid an evaluation plan, and alongside that evaluation plan, we developed a rubrics. So this is the rubrics that I talked about, or it's part of the rubrics. You might not be familiar with the term rubrics, but essentially you know what they are. Rubrics are the tool that your school teachers used when they give you your school report back in the day. So down one side you would have maths, English, science, history, whatever, and then you'd have along the top exceeded, achieved, developing, progressing, no progress, for example. And then under each, there'd be criteria that say what would fit within each of those boxes. And a rubrics for the evaluation does exactly the same thing. It takes the particular statement that we made, and then it says, well, what happens if what would this look like if we exceeded it? What would it look like if we achieved it? If we're only developing or progressing stage, what does that look like? And if we're making no progress, how does that look? So it allows you to articulate where you would be in each of the phases of the project. And this is a really important foundation piece to think through, because it starts to articulate the change spaces that you expect to see develop along the life of the program. Now we're going to come back to the rubric again later, because we did use it in the midterm evaluation and we did use it in the summative evaluation. But another key part of the midterm evaluation was the key evaluation questions. And so when you get to the mid part of an evaluation of a program this size, you want to be seeing that change is starting to happen, that the things that you're starting to activate within the program are starting to make a difference. People are starting to engage and they're valuing the program. So these are the key evaluation questions that we asked with our midterm evaluation. We said what degree are participating farmers having access to the technology on the farm. Remember, that was stream 1 that we had in our theory of change. To what degree are the farmers engaging with and in the project? Again, that was stream 2. You know, that was like engaging with farmers and stakeholders. How effectively has the project engaged and communicated with key stakeholders to date? Again, stream 2. What value have farmers obtained from participating in Irrigation Insight? So again, this is kind of linked somewhere between stream 1 and stream 2. To what degree is the program influencing farmer decision making and or practices? Very much our stream 1, the change on farm. And finally, what evidence is there that the project team has been working co-innovatively? That was our stream 3. So we asked key questions that embodied our theory of change, so that we could take a stock take of where we were at by that stage of the program. And then as we came to our summative evaluation, we really only had one key strong evaluation question, which was, hey, did the Irrigation Insight program meet and deliver its intended goals? And once we knew that, and you know, by the way, we did, we wanted to have more what we call sub-evaluation questions or reflective questions. So we wanted to know, you know, to what degree was the tool influencing the farmer's decision making? How sustainable was what we developed beyond the life of the program? How did it work at scale? How involved were the farmers in participating in the design of those processes, and how did that make a difference? And again, as we said before, co-innovation was really important. In what ways did the Irrigation Insight team recognise benefits from utilising the co-innovation approach? Rightio, time to come back to our rubrics. How did we use our rubrics in our midterm and summative evaluation? Well, the rubrics is a really great tool for giving you a really good visual and positioning, as I mentioned before, but this demonstrates it perfectly. The midterm evaluation is a single tick. The summative or end of program evaluation is a tick with a circle around it. And you can see that as I went through the midterm evaluation, I was able to position where we were at for each of those statements. And then as we came to the end of program evaluation, the summative one, I was able to reposition based on the new evidence base where we were by the end of the program. And you can see that the great news is most of our arrows went in the right direction, from achieved mostly through to exceeded. However, the great thing is with these visuals, even if you had an arrow that went in the other direction, it signals that straight away, jump in there, figure out what's going on there, get some learnings and make some changes that need to happen in the program. So they're just a great way for giving signals. You can see on the far column there, I had evidence base that was just some bullet points that signals that if I follow those trails, I have an evidence base to justify why I chose to position those ticks where I did, or where we did as a team. So again, just a really good way of visualizing, positioning and justifying your progress that you're making in the program, or then the progress that you did make in the program. We thought that it would be useful if we did some reflections as a team on what it's like when you're doing evaluation alongside a sizable project like this one. One of the key things that we found is that you must have buy-in from the whole team. That includes the leadership and all the troops, and that was definitely the way that the Irrigation Insight program and team worked. Fantastic. MS led the charge, evaluation right from the start, and the whole team along from the start. And this was also because the team was engaged in the design, not just a program design, but an overlaying of the evaluation design. And so as we went alongside, we designed that for fit for purpose work alongside the work that was happening. Occasionally we did a bit of specific work or bespoke work where that was necessary, but as much as possible designed that to work alongside the project work that was happening. Of course, one of the key things that we had to have was really sturdy baseline data. You can never know what the change is in the future unless you know where you started. And this was a key effort that we put in the Irrigation Insight program as well. Really important, we found, to work closely with the key communications people in the team. Can't recommend this highly enough. They know when there's a great impact story and how to share that in its best way possible. So if you really want to see a difference from having collected great data and being able to tell great stories, it is getting people that know how to get out there and make impact with those to that wider audience that you want to reach. Another key thing we found was having really great diversity within the team. It meant as the evaluation, we had a whole range of skill bases to draw on, and draw on them we did. And as you can tell probably from my first diagram, which was the plan, do, review cycle, I'm a big fan of ensuring that there's a feedback loops constantly coming back into the team. How do they know where things are at? How do they know if things that need to change if we're not feeding those loops in? This project team had a great way of having regular team meetings and reflective sessions of where we're at, how things are going, what data and information's coming in, do we need to change what we're doing? Great way of working that this team had. And in the same way, they were engaged. They had a reason to value that evaluation data coming back to them. And therefore, when we were asking them to go out and collect this data alongside the work they were doing, they were more than happy to do it. I'm also a big fan, you would have figured this out from the rubrics, of finding ways to visualize the change in the process and in the design. And so where you can show visual ways to show clearly, quickly, easily, such as that rubrics with the arrows and that positioning, it just makes it so much easier to tell your story if you can kind of find these ways to do this. And there's more and more a bigger push towards data viz that's come through not only in evaluation but in all science, and I think this is something that's really important to embrace. A key lesson that I think the whole team will relate to is that nothing ever goes entirely to plan. In fact, any project I've been in, nothing ever goes entirely to plan. So really important, always be flexible and be open to change. Without that kind of embracing that flexibility, things are just too rigid, and you never quite make the full advantage that you could possibly make. I'm going to hand over now to Jordan, who's going to track us through some of the tools that we used in the process of the evaluation.
Thanks, Tony. Morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Jordan. I supported Tony with the evaluation and monitoring, and also dabbled in the social science for Irrigation Insight. And I would love to give you an evaluation methods overview. So this slide shows the development and variety of research activities over time, and it shows those key points in the monitoring and evaluation process, including setting up a good baseline, the midterm and the summative evaluations, which Tony has already mentioned. And it just goes to show the range of data collected from biophysical, economic, and social science over the life of the program. Many of these activities were also kind of touch points that built connections and trust with the end user group. So as well as interviews with farmers, we had comms engagement throughout the life of the program for activities such as on-farm photo shoots and video shoots, which were a really unique touch point and product, I guess. And we also held annual workshops with both the farmer and stakeholder groups to ensure that we were giving plenty of opportunities for that all important feedback. To give you an example of what those methods and our process allowed us to develop in the program, I'll show you briefly the development of the tool Irrigate. So this is an irrigation scheduling tool. Our research process allowed us to understand how a tool might land with the user group. Is it useful and is it needed? We collected user feedback from research developed web portal. We had stakeholder feedback throughout the project, and we had co-design workshops, which I will now go into a bit more detail with you on. So this is co-design in action within the program. Across 2 annual meetings, we asked the stakeholder and farmer groups to show us their ideal decision-making tool. And by engaging with both of these groups, we worked towards the concept of greatest utility for the user. For us, a co-design solution is innovative. It informs the designer with multiple perspectives, but it is very much user-centered, drawing on user experience, skills, and their very valuable experience. It is democratic and participatory. And the information from this co-design process went into our development of resources and tools, alongside other opportunities for feedback along the way. And overall, it contributed to a shared understanding of drivers for better practice. So with that kind of brief overview of evaluation methods and what our process enabled within the program, I'd like to return to the idea or the approach of co-innovation in terms of enhancing change space. Our approach included embracing those core principles to build and nurture the team that contribute to overall impact. Utilising co-innovation well meant that a good working relationship was built with multiple people, and that ensured that we were looking at the problem from all different angles. This included embedding communications right from the beginning of the program, which meant that the communication products were high quality, of course. They were also fit for purpose, they were well timed, and we were able to recognise key opportunities that led to breakthroughs along the way. Activities like photo shoots and video shoots were able to capture the change space in a unique in situ way, and they were a great point of connection between the farmer group and researchers, fostering that all-important trust and inclusion. Alongside more formal channels were informal open door policy kind of communication between team members and farmers, and I think MS in particular was kind of on call for this. And in addition to multiple feedback loops, reflexive engagement from the research team, stakeholders and farmers ensured that the research impact could be viewed and tested as fit for purpose along the way, which is a really key aspect of the research vision. Right, so now I'm going to pass you back to MS to give you a bit of a summary and wrap up. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony and Jordan, for taking us through that monitoring and evaluation part of that talk. Now, just to end this talk, I'll give you an example of how this monitoring and evaluation changed the way that we did research in this program and what kind of outcomes we generated based on that monitoring and evaluation. Some of you may remember from one of my earlier slides talked about improving irrigation water use efficiency. Then I said through improved access to data. So that is more a researcher view to the world. This is what we wrote in 2015 when we were writing that particular proposal. So our thinking at that time was, as a researcher, if I can generate the right information for the right user at the right times, then irrigations will be very efficient and we can achieve the water use efficiency. But as we went through this monitoring and evaluation program and going through the cycle of implementing a solution and learning from that solution and reviewing and revising and refining our ways of approaching the problem, we learned a lot. depending on who you are in this world, in this co-innovation world, if you're a producer, you are interested in growing grass, or in this case of pastoral farmers who we were working with, your interest is productivity. You are not interested in, you are interested in water use efficiency, but you are interested in the water use efficiency, but your endpoint is productivity. For a regulator, water use efficiency is important as it can lead them to a better management of water resources. It's reducing the drainage and leaching and all those things. So everyone has got a different view to this water use efficiency, and they want to see they got a different endpoints in their mind for this water use efficiency. All the other uses that I haven't talked about here, they're all sitting in between these three researchers, regulators, and producers. So there is an economic dimension to it, there is an environmental dimension to it, effectiveness and efficiency dimension to this one. So now we learned this is a good outcome. We know there is more than one view to water use efficiency. So how do we take this one and implement this as a solution that it can fit the three views of the world of water use efficiency? So what you see on screen is a product of this, or one of the products of this monitoring and evaluation program that we had implemented in this Irrigation Insight MB program. I'll take you through this picture that you see on screen. What you see there on the top with the green line going up and down the green patch, that shows the productivity, which is what the producer or the farmer is quite interested. It is a daily pasture produced in kilograms per hectare. The next set of bars that you see, which is the rainfall, irrigation, and evapotranspiration on a daily basis, that says how much rainfall happened and how much water that particular farm was losing. The one below, which is a patch of red and orange and blue colors, that shows the soil moisture conditions within the top 80 centimeter of the soil. So if I were a researcher, I'm quite interested in producing information on rainfall, irrigation, evapotranspiration, and what the soil moisture is doing within the top 80 centimeter to let the farmer know whether they need to be irrigating today. I also gave them the weather forecast information, which is on the right side towards the end of the right hand of the slide, telling them how much rainfall that they're likely to get in the next 3 days and what that means to their soil moisture. So I produce that information, that I have produced the right information in the right format for the right user, in this case a farmer. If I were a regulator, I'll be looking at the soil moisture conditions quite carefully to see whenever the farmers are doing an irrigation, is there a drainage happening from that irrigation? So if you see a blue bar going from top to the bottom in that uh, bottom part of the plot, that means there's a drainage happening and a likely leaching happening from the drainage, so that they are able to keep an eye on that one. And for the producers, that they can see how the soil moisture is changing and what kind of rainfall and irrigations that they are getting on farm, and how that is changing their pasture production on a daily basis. So this plot, which we call as the insight plot, gives all the three major users in this case, producers, researchers, and the regulators. The water use efficiency message is water being efficiently used from a drainage perspective, from the production perspective, and from the perspective of doing an efficient irrigation practice. So this is an excellent outcome, and this is a great research impact because now we got this as a commercial product at the end of the program. As a program manager of this MB Endeavor Research Program, Irrigation Insight, I look back and I just want to highlight three take-home messages here. I think Tony talked about quite a few earlier. So as a research program manager, I just want to emphasize three things that I did on this program, that we did on this program, that was quite helpful for me in achieving the research impact. First one is start the research and monitoring from day one. We are talking about a co-innovation approach in this case, where things are not linear and things are not, there is no control experiment. So you need to understand what is the baseline condition, which means you need to start the monitoring and evaluation right on day one. And second thing is have the buy-in of the entire research team. This is quite important because if the research team doesn't believe in this process, then it is going to be a challenge to implement it. So have them on board, explain the process and explain the outcomes that you are likely to get from this process, and have them on board. I was very lucky to have a very supportive team supporting this initiative. And lastly, make sure there is some flexibility in the program to alter the direction based on the monitoring and evaluation results. This is quite important. This is where including the funding agency, in this case we included MB as part of the stakeholder group, is quite important. Once they are part of the stakeholder group, they understand the views and the need to change, then they will support it much better than when they don't know any of these reasons for changing. So have that flexibility. I know I put it on as the last point in the slide. That is the most difficult thing to achieve. Ensure that you can bring in some flexibility into the program to respond to the evaluations. So with that one, I will end this talk here and open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I know we had at least a couple of questions coming through in the chat. Let's have a quick, right. So Katrine was asking, who did the assessment of progress? Was it the research team or was it done with the end users? Who'd like to answer that one? Tony, do you want to go first as the evaluator?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one. So in the assessment, if we're thinking specifically about the rubrics, then it was done by the evaluation team, which was predominantly me bringing together all of the data from across the previous couple of years' work that we were to the point of doing that assessment and making some judgment calls. And I think this is one of the differences that we get between research and social research and evaluation, is that you take that role and it's your job to make sense of all that data from all those different streams and all those different feedback loops that have been moving through the year and make a judgment call on those. I do like your question though, because it poses the question about, can you do a participatory process around positioning that? And the answer is yes, you can. You probably just have to put the resource and the time behind that, because you'd have to put a lot more effort into synthesizing all of those different feedback loops into a way that a group can quickly get their head around that and use that for decision making. Jordan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, very well said.
Katrine, did you have any follow-up question off the back of that response from Tony?
No, I didn't. I'm struggling to turn my camera on because I've been playing around with settings now.
That's okay.
I just wanted to comment, like, really commending that presentation today. It's really interesting. So I'm from MPI and work in that science policy space. And those questions around how the science system can connect better with the actual users of the science is really on top of mind, especially with Te Ara Paurangi happening at the moment as well. So really interested in the presentation today, and just understanding, yeah, how you bring the end users in to guide that. And also my other question probably was, how do researchers deal with when your end users say the research isn't actually doing what they need to do? So have you looked a little bit at that as well, or because you've done so much co-design, you didn't have those problems?
Emis, do you want to comment as a researcher and the program manager?
Yeah, thanks, Katrin. Thanks, Kara. I think this is where the flexibility comes into play. When we started the program, I was giving another talk for the IPN yesterday. All our thinking was around how to start the irrigation, when do farmers start the irrigation, and how much they apply, and things like that. Then we got other stakeholders, in this case, ECAN, since we're working in Canterbury, the regulators came into play. They were very interested in drainage. So that was not part of the original question that we started with. So then they started talking about actually when to stop the irrigation or when not to do the irrigation. So having that flexibility is quite handy. I think that answers your question, saying that is actually directly addressing your question, saying that we don't know all the questions that are going to be asked in the process. So go with the open mind and have the flexibility to alter. And there are going to be times that you can't do everything that we are being asked of. So know that boundary and acknowledge it and accept it. I think one of the things that we did, I think that was talked about quite a lot in this talk, was also trust and inclusiveness. I think people trusting us, when we say this is what is happening and this is what actually we are doing, having the trust is quite important. And they understood, some of the things cannot be done in the 5 years time and what we have done. I think the challenging part is writing a proposal that has got the flexibility in it. Thinking all these things is good once you get into the program, but how would you write such a program to start with? How would you actually going to convince the funder? There could be questions coming during the program. We might be going in all different directions. Please fund us to do this program. I'll be very, very surprised if I can find a funder who will be happy to fund me with that one. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Amy.
you.
I'll just add a
No,
bit
go,
to that, if I may. So I think we referred to it earlier. We had really great connection between the team and the farmers that were helping in this co-development process. But one of the important aspects was the social science that came alongside. So they were able to start asking those questions just to check in, are there any sticky points that we need to kind of be taking account of as we move forward? So that was another important part of the program.
I want to make sure I hit Dennis and Paul's questions, but I do have one other question that's linked to this. So let's tackle it now. But MS, you were talking about the trust of the inclusiveness, and Tony, the connection with the farmers, and that sort of supporting the ability to be flexible and being open to that. Was it a cold start for you, or did you already have some relationships built and established? So really what I'm getting at is sometimes that flexibility, if it relies on trust does take some time to develop. So it might be useful just to comment how well established or mature were those relationships already? Or was there work that you had to do as part of the proposal writing process to get everyone kind of at about that same starting point, I suppose?
That's a bit difficult to comment on. It wasn't a cold start. I think we knew what we are getting into, so we have prepared the farmers for what we are going through. Maybe I'll talk about two things that'll be quite useful. I never talked to the farmers anything about the co-innovation at all. I didn't tell them we are actually using a co-innovation process instead of a tech transfer process. I never put them through that thing. All we did is we left the floor open for everyone to contribute to that one. So the other thing that happened during one of the farmers meeting, actually, I didn't notice this one. It was noticed by Tracy Williams from Plant and Food, who was in that meeting. We were in a town hall having this meeting on a cold day, sometime in May or June, in middle of Cust. So we were having this meeting. I just showed the farmers and everyone in that room what kind of irrigations were happening in the last year, and we started a conversation. At one point, I went to the back of the room to have a drink. Then I came back. Then Tracy commented saying that farmers didn't stop talking. They kept on going with the conversation. They didn't want me to be there. Actually, they don't need me to be at the front all the time to have that conversation. I thought that is a moment that actually captured the trust. Those moments that you don't really actually look for right down, only someone else outside can observe it and say, oh, actually, they trust you. Actually, they think you don't need to be there all the time at the front to be leading that conversation. They can do it by themselves. So those things, it's not a cold start, but it is something you develop it over time. It can't happen on day one. It may happen on day N, but you don't know when is that day going to happen. So that is quite a heartwarming experience on that day, on a cold day.
Thanks, MS. Okay, let's go to Dennis's question. So he said salience of water use seems low for many irrigators, given usually abundant supply. do you think that there will be greater future relevance as water gets a higher priority for in-stream or aquifer values, not to mention the need to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus losses at source? So, question about the salience of water use, and do we think that there's going to be a greater future relevance?
Yeah, certainly. I don't think there is any question about it. I think the challenges now are how we are going to implement some of the things that we have done in this program. Scaling up and scaling out is going to be one challenge that we are actually tackling. I don't think we got a solution for it. No, we know what we can. I think that is where having regional councils and other stakeholders, industry stakeholders on board will be quite useful. I think farmers understand it. The challenge is they don't know what are the options available for them to make sure that what they're doing is actually making they are the right decisions and right choices that they're making. I think that is going to be a very critical part. I think this is something we just can't leave it alone to the farmers to go and find the technology to use it. I think it has to come from the rest of the stakeholder group. And second thing is the kind of evidence that we want the farmers to collect and tell us that they're using the water wisely and efficiently. I think we all have to work on that one to make sure that evidence is it's robust and it will stand the test of the time and the expertise. I think we have to help them. I think it is coming. The challenge is how we are going to put it to the community, how we are going to scale up what we have done, how we are going to scale up. I think that's a big challenge. I don't think we have really tackled it fully in this program. Maybe there is another MB program waiting to be written. Yeah.
Dennis, did you have a follow-up question?
Well, it's really a comment that the word salience comes out of energy, and the challenge for this sort of project has been that it's like talking about efficiency of fuel use, but before 1973, it just wasn't salient. So you had hugely inefficient cars using huge amounts of fuel. And it's only when the first oil shock occurred and the price of oil went up by about a factor of 5 that it started being taken seriously. And then it declined. And I think this is the problem with just seeking to respond to what farmers think their needs are. I don't think they really realise what's coming towards them in terms of Te Mana o Te Wai and other logical questions from external parties about how much water is being used. And I know a lot of reporting about water use efficiency doesn't match what you see in reality. It's going to be up to industry to be accountable and to be responsible for bringing forward numbers and showing they're using water properly. I think it's a particular concern for us in Canterbury. There is clearly a process underway by which Ngāi Tahu seek to confirm their rangatiratanga over water here, and that would lead to a very swift need to pull up socks and take things very seriously. The numbers could be pretty large. The good news is that a lot of this is about avoiding having a rational approach to a change and rather than a panic one. And my concern about the panic approach is the moment people start talking about climate change, we might lose a bit of water, they start running around and talking about the most expensive and divisive opportunity, which is to build storage. And if you look very closely at Canterbury, there hasn't been any significant large storage built here since I've been in this role in 10 years with water infrastructure. And I very much doubt whether there's an economic case to do it. If the work needs to go into farm systems and water use and supporting, better ways of doing things, and the infrastructure at that stage becomes pretty boring and rational and data-based.
Yeah, I wonder, I had I suppose a linked question that might circle back to those points that you're making, Dennis, for MS and Jordan and Tony, and it was about, MS, you mentioned the fact that, okay, there's some scaling challenges, so you've kind of got this proof of concept, it supported those farmers to make wiser choices. Whilst there's some scale issues, I'd be interested to know, did you hear, and even better, were you able to possibly capture in research reports or something, some of possibly, I want to say, insights that the farmers had? Did they have some aha moments where you were saying, that's shifted them from what you were characterising at the start, being quite subjective, not really based on very good signals at all, to another state and if they were starting to feel quite motivated possibly to talk about this more widely, you know, did you start to see some of those ripples beyond their farm into others?
Yeah, we got quite a few reports and interviews, actually informal interviews and formal interviews recorded on these things as what farmers are doing, even going beyond outside their farms, even within their own farms, what they were doing and how they changed their views to some of these things. So there are some recorded interviews available, and we wrote a few papers also. That is one of the things that people always complain when you have a program like this one. You don't write very many outputs. Actually, we are lucky to have quite a few outputs as papers that record some of the farmer choices. I think there is a question from John Morris online too about outputs, interesting about reports coming out of these things. We got quite a few of those things. I'm happy to share them. You can get in touch with me without going through all the list of those things here on the talk.
Yeah, and I think so. One point, you've had the contact details up, and we're very happy to share contact details if you need them or want them. The other thing actually is the segues kind of nicely off that conversation and to Paul's question about will the M&E continue post-project and look at longer term impacts. Keen to hear a general comment, but also just to say, if there was that kind of opportunity, it would be a really good way to start to capture some of those ripple effects in a more substantive way. But Tony, Jordan, any comments?
I'll let Jordan take this one.
I think you're probably better equipped to answer this, Tony. This is really about continuation of monitoring and evaluation, right?
Can it continue when the money stops and runs out?
That's a big question. I don't think we've decided on a formal pathway to do that, but I guess we will see it if in continued projects working with that same group of farmers, and yeah, it would be great to capture in the ripple effects that you're talking about, and hopefully we will be able to in some future funded programs. Tony, did you want to add to that? Maybe in ways we would do that?
So it's clear that the program is or the tools developed are still evolving, and that's a really exciting phase that we're in. I don't think at the end of the MB program of work we were to be in a excuse me, a commercialization phase of them, but actually it's ready to move in that space now, and so I think ongoing tracking of that will just see these tools being used in wider circles in farming, but also adapted into other sectors is my sense. Will there be evaluation per se of that as it moves through? It depends on those programs of work as they evolve, but it would be fantastic to come back and say 2 or 3 years and just do a stock take of the impact or the movement that those have made and the change spaces that have been created as a result. One of the great things that I found as the evaluator towards the end of the program was that, you know, that last farmer meeting that we had, and we had regular farmer meetings, was that the farmers were saying, don't take this away. We love this. It's doing exactly what we need it to do. And I think that was a great place to be at the end of the program. And I just think, given that positive farmer feedback, it's only got great building blocks to build from.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Tony. We've got, I think, time for one more question. I want to make sure we get to James, who asked a really good one. Understood that the program was done over a number of years. How would you approach this with a new group of farmers who don't necessarily have this much time to implement change?
I think that is where, Jane, the learnings from this program are quite useful. I think we are not starting at 0 point or the square one. I think we have learned something from the other farmers. I think And we can also use these farmers that we have got now as catalysts to go and inform these farmers. I think that is one thing we have been doing. I'm sure you would have seen some newspaper articles coming out in the last few days. Actually, we were not even involved in the entire thing. It is actually farmers talking to the media and telling how they have used this program to do what they are doing. So using those farmers as catalysts to have some of this conversation, as opposed to, if we are thinking we are the only one who can carry that message, then it becomes difficult unless you start cloning people. And if we use the existing network that we have developed as part of this program, I think that will speed up the process. I don't think we did it over 5 years. Maybe if you go to a new area, we should be able to do a lot quicker than 5 years.
Yeah, and that's and I think that touches on some of those intangible, hard, the things that are hard or difficult to measure. The trust and the credibility, and whilst we know it intrinsically, it's not often talked about, that's building on the trust and the credibility of others who can tell their own story, is a really good way to start to pathway that sort of thing. Look, we've got 2 minutes to go, so I just want to take a moment to thank MS and Jordan and Tony once again for agreeing to take time out of their very busy days and schedules to share these learnings. They're very open to being approached with questions. And if this has jogged any ideas or questions or thoughts in a more general sense that for you that you think IPEN as a collective or all 7 CRIs might be able to organise, it might be training or another webinar, or if you've got some ideas for some, please do share them with us. We'd much rather have too many ideas than too few. That would be a very nice place to be in. Before I close as well, I just want to let people know, if you're not aware, we're trying to get these webinars up about once a month. And our next one in August is a really fantastic presentation from Maria Heppier at ESR, who's going to be talking about her reflections on undertaking bicultural research as a Pākehā. So if you haven't seen that, Chanel, I think, has just posted the link into Eventbrite, so you can register that way. And again, feel free to circulate it to other colleagues who you think might be of interest. We've recorded the session so that others who haven't been able to come along will be able to view it in future, and we'll be sharing the link to the recording once we've sorted out, got that sorted out in the background. But otherwise, thank you once again, everybody, for attending. And I do hope that the rest of the day is good and you stay warm and dry wherever you are around the motu. Kia ora koutou, and thank you very much, everyone. Have a great one.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.